this week's episode of Assassination Classroom, the backstory of Koro Sensei is officially revealed, and we get to learn that he's essentially a living, ticking time bomb. This week's episode of Ass Class was heartfelt, action-packed, and extremely bloody. One of the most violent episodes that I've seen from the entire series, and that's because we finally got to learn a little bit more about the origins of Koro Sensei, and how he went from being the world's greatest assassin and being turned into a giant smiling yellow octopus. Picking up from last week's episode, we get to see that Koro Sensei is still enduring lots of inhumane tests as they try to transform him into some sort of being which can contain antimatter, a material so powerful that it can cause massive explosions. In fact, in this week's episode, we get to learn that, spoiler alert, Koro Sensei did not destroy the moon. Actually, believe it or not, it was a tiny little mouse who had just been injected with some antimatter material, which caused all of these tentacles to explode from its back, causing this massive explosion, turning the moon into the crescent moon that we currently see in the series. Now, because Koro Sensei is also being imbued with this antimatter power, it also explains why he is so worried about the Earth, because essentially, at the end of March, when this whole assassination attempt is supposed to take place, he is simply going to die. And if you saw how small a mouse was and it created that big of an explosion, just imagine what Koro Sensei is going to do. I haven't even started talking about his brand new powers which start to manifest in this week's episode. Essentially, he finally starts to learn and control to use his tentacles. You can even see that his body is slowly transforming as the episode is going on. Basically, he is turning into a monster, but he's also starting to embrace this power, realizing that he's so powerful that he can just bust out when he wants to. However, there is one thing that I do believe that has been keeping Koro Sensei at this facility, and that's the character of Aguri, who, at first I sort of saw the relationship as sort of a brother-sister thing, but by the end of this week's episode, I can honestly see them as a full-blown couple, especially in the final moments of this week's episode, which hit me right here. So we get to see that over the course of time, Aguri has almost known him for an entire year, and thus he's actually given an official birthday, because Koro Sensei's past involved the fact that he was an orphan who had no family, thus he really had no name or any sort of background. So Aguri decided to make this the moment where he would have his birthday, which I honestly think is a really tender moment, especially when he uses his tentacles to actually go through the glass, transform into a hand to comfort her. That scene was pretty damn fantastic, until unfortunately, eventually, Koro Sensei reveals that it is time for him to leave. He decides to finally manifest his powers as all of these tentacles start to erupt from his body, literally becoming one with himself, and this is actually the form that we've seen multiple times in the series, which has constantly been covered in shadow. Basically, just imagine Koro Sensei's human form covered in tentacles head to toe. His hair also starts to turn a white color. The thing though, Koro Sensei was an amazing killer before. Now that they have given him this ridiculous arsenal, he's even more deadly than you could even possibly imagine. He asks Aguri to leave, who unfortunately ends up getting beaten by Kotaro. What a dickhead that guy is. And then he just manages to walk his way out of this facility, taking out all of these soldiers left and right, in a scene which is honestly one of the most intense and violent scenes that I've seen from Koro Sensei. And I know this is a weird comparison, but have any of you ever actually heard of this anime series called Elfen Lied or Elfen Lied? There's a scene at the beginning of that series where there's this experimental girl who walks out of this facility and just completely wipes the floor with all of these soldiers. That's exactly what this scene reminded me of. Not only that, but we also get to learn why Kotaro lost his eye. And that's thanks to Koro Sensei. You see, they have these really cool weapons in the building which take the form of these spears, which can lock on to Koro Sensei and the antimatter. Essentially, I'm guessing this is where the anti-Koro Sensei weaponry came from, and he's able to dodge all of those, break them, and he actually ends up throwing them right into Kotaro's face, which I have to admit was pretty freaking awesome. This is, of course, also where Kotaro probably wanted to start getting his revenge against Koro Sensei. The episode ends with the big moment where we get to see how Aguri was actually killed. They almost make it seem like Koro Sensei was going to be the one that did it, but when they have this nice tender moment where they start to embrace each other, where she doesn't want him to leave and she wants to follow him, another one of those secret weapons activates and it actually ends up accidentally killing her, impaling her, and then she has her final moments where she begs Koro Sensei in his final year of life to look after the students of Class 3E, to teach them the things that she could not, and to live a life that is worth living. And that's what I think is one of the most important things about this episode. You realize why Koro Sensei is traveling around so much, making friends with people, and trying to influence these students. He's trying to live out the last year of his life, and he's trying to end it with a bang by leaving an amazing impression on these students, which is going to be amazing for the future. The problem is he only has so much time and he has to get someone to kill him so that the Earth isn't going to be destroyed, so it certainly adds a lot of drama to this series and something that I can really appreciate. The end of the episode, we get to see all of the students have just got done learning about this story, and honestly, they don't even really know what to feel. Basically, their spirits are completely down by the end of the episode. They don't even really know if they're going to be able to go through with this assassination, especially after learning so much about Koro Sensei. So what's the rundown on this week's episode of Assassination Classroom? This was a fantastic episode right here. These last two episodes have just been great. As someone who's wanted to learn a lot more about Koro Sensei, these are the type of episodes that I can really appreciate. I'm glad they were able to keep a lot of this stuff completely hidden. And this week's episode really expanded on the character of Koro Sensei, taking him from being a ridiculous, overpowered mascot and actually turning him into a living, breathing character. And that's something that I can really get behind. Not to mention that this week's episode, aside from all the cool action scenes, also had some moments which I thought were really great, especially all of the ones between Koro Sensei and Aguri. But I think the biggest bombshell about this episode is the fact that it was a mouse who was injected with antimatter, which actually caused the moon to explode. They blame it on Koro Sensei, and things are not looking good for Earth right now, because if he were to explode, he would probably just destroy everything. I mean, a mouse is like this big. Koro Sensei is absolutely massive, filled to the brim with antimatter. He's going to completely obliterate everything if he is not killed, and that's going to cause a little bit of conflict because his students have become so attached to them. How could they kill him at this point? Although they have no choice, otherwise it's going to mean the absolute destruction of everything. It's a really interesting concept and has shown how the series has evolved from being just sort of your standard high school anime fare. And that's definitely the best thing about Assassination Classroom, is its gimmick. That gimmick being Koro Sensei, who honestly has become one of the most enduring anime characters that I have seen in quite some time, and I'm always going to remember him, especially this episode right here, which I honestly think was one of the craziest episodes of Assassination Classroom, and one of the most unique, especially tonally when compared to the rest of the series. It also helps that this week's episode had good artwork, fantastic animation, and a great color scheme as usual, with lots of great moments that are going to hit you right here and get you pumped up for all of the cool action scenes. This was a fantastic episode of Ass Class, which you should definitely check out if you're a fan of the manga or you're watching the anime. So I'm going to give this week's episode right here, that's right, a 5 out of 5, another kick-ass stellar episode of Assassination Classroom. But if any of you guys watched this week's episode of Assassination Classroom, why don't you tell me what you thought about it in the comment section below. Did you have a favorite scene from this week's episode? Maybe a favorite action scene? Did you love the poetic justice when Koro Sensei actually ended up destroying the eye of Kotaru? And what do you want to see from the rest of Assassination Classroom? Please tell me in the comment section below. You guys are awesome. Thank you for watching this review. I really appreciate it. I cannot say that enough. If you guys would like to help out the channel, please share this video review with all of your friends and make sure to subscribe to the channel. That way you'll see all of our latest anime and manga reviews. Make sure to leave me your comments and make sure to also follow us on social media. You'll find links for all that stuff in the description box below. So thank you guys again for watching, and as always, stay dandy, baby.